Link travels to two unknown lands, guided by the Triforce, tasked with saving the people from their destruction. On one side, a sorceress is manipulating time, causing people, animals, and significant events to up and disappear, as if they never even existed in the first place. And, in another world, an evil general is causing, essentially global warming? Look, in their defense, they did do a better job of making it seem more menacing in-game, so I'll give them that. When I last covered Zelda, I talked about Capcom helping create the Minish Cap, a solid entry with a lot of unique ideas and freedom to explore the intellectual property. With that, I would have to guess off the backs of the Oracle games. The Oracle games being Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. Now we're going back to Return of the King Capcom and seeing some more Zelda games they created in the past. I will be covering both of these two games in separate videos, however. They have a nice gimmick of playing in whatever order you'd like to, and in my most recent playthrough I went with Seasons first, so we're going to start with that after a brief little catch up on these games and why they are intertwined together. Anyways, I think we wasted more than enough time. Let's get into part 1 of this duology, starting with Oracle of Seasons, initially released for the Game Boy Color all the way back in 2001. Let's dive in. Starting with history, Capcom, or more specifically a subsidiary of them known as Flagship, while not active now, helped with many games in addition to the Zelda games like Resident Evil 2, some of the Dino Crisis games, as well as a few Kirby entries before the group dissolved, and many talents moved on into Capcom's main force. Flagship would have began working on 3 Zelda titles initially for the Game Boy Color. Now, of course, we only saw 2 of them at the time, but a third would have been created in tandem with the other 2. While little information exists on this cancelled game, it is most likely would have been translated out to Oracle of Secrets, and featured the third, seemingly neglected Oracle/Goddess Furor, who we get to see repurposed in other ways in this game. It seems the biggest issue was that in the debugging process, where the game's core gimmick of linking the 3 games had some issues, the team scaled it back to 2 that we have today, making the 2 games easier to link between each other. I suppose you're really wanting to know about this gimmick, and you want to get into that, huh? Whoa, hold your horses there, cowboy. We gotta get into the plot first, so buckle up and get on in. This bit was stupid. I give up, man. The plot's pretty simple. Link is transported into the land of Holodrum by the powers of the Triforce. Immediately, Link encounters a troop, headed by the vibrant dancer Din. Din immediately is outed at the Oracle of Seasons by an evil general named Onyx, who wrecks the troop and steals away Din. Onyx uses Din's power, controlling the seasons, to sink the Temple of Seasons, as well as messing with the flow of seasons and their effect on Holodrum. You know, I did make a joke at the expense of Onyx at the beginning, but hey, props to the game for showing how things can actually get messed up when you screw with the seasons like that. While you can imagine the effect on this would have on wildlife and a sudden flip of temperature, the game gives us a few examples. I would say we get the best example of how the seasons can truly mess with the land is on the way to the 4th dungeon. In the game's town, Sunken City. It's already a very water-centric town at the foot of the mountain Mount Cuckoo, but with the ice and snow melting from the mountaintop above, it floods the city, making it inaccessible unless by ways of lots of swimming and diving. On the other side of this range is the Goron Mountain, where the Gorons who inhabit there are suffering from a brutal and sudden winter. Most of them are sick and or just freezing to death. Whether by intentional design or no, I do like how the game shows us how this world is affected. Instead of telling you every single step of the journey, you just have to see and use a lot of subtext. It's a nice show-don't-tell moment you only get with interactions with the various NPCs and other world clues. Back focusing on the story, Impa, Zelda's attendant and a reoccurring Zelda character, reveals herself to be disguising Din's troop in order to keep her safe. Or at least try to keep Din safe. Impa tasks Link with meeting the Maku Tree, a mystical entity in Holodrum that asks Link to gather the 8 essences of nature scattered throughout the land. With the essences, he can confront Onyx on the northern peak of the Temple of Season remains, where he and Din now lie. As well as traversing through Holodrum, Link has to travel through the subterranean land of Subrosia, inhabited by the Subrosians. Hooded race, kinda similar to dwarf people. The Temple of Seasons landed here once sunk, and Link oftentimes has to return here to assist in his quest, as well as gain powers from the Temple of Seasons' primary artifact, the Rod of Seasons. This item came from Din, I would have to assume, and allows Link to gain the powers of the 4 seasons over time to assist in gathering the essences. Pretty short and sweet in terms of story. Now, the gameplay can be as standard as you get with the 2D Zelda. The style and gameplay follow similarly to Link's Awakening, released earlier in the Game Boy's life, which took inspiration heavily from the foundation A Link to the Past created for 2D Zelda. Seasons focuses on a more action approach, in contrast to Ages is focusing more on a puzzle-focused adventure. We see that quite often in design in both dungeons and bosses. It is the standard fare of dungeon exploration and all that fun stuff, with both games having 8 core dungeons, ending with the final level and showdown with the big bad. Back to Flagship, the initial project they were tasked with for Zelda was remaking the original on Game Boy Color. Now obviously that didn't happen, but the assets and callbacks are aplenty. Take for example the first dungeon. It takes place in a tree, with the end boss even being the exact same green dragon. Many bosses are brought back here as well, almost being a remake of the original game's boss design, usually with new mechanics and methods to defeat them. We also have some item debuts here, like the Magnetic Glove, allowing Link to push or pull himself to others depending on the glove's polarity, and also the Rock's Cape, a better jump with an added glide that we would see in the return as well. We see the Slingshot make a return here with the bonus of the triple Slingshot, which is used in a spread shot and to have more targets to hit. We also see another gameplay addition in the form of companions or rideable mounts. The 3 we have are a boxing kangaroo named Ricky, an aquatic dinosaur named Dimitri, and an obese bear that can hover with his tiny little wings named Moosh. You can use all of these for a segment in the game, but one stays with you depending on how you obtain this flute that you can use to call said companion. It does add extra replayability, which is super cool. They aren't super useful in truth because they usually are outclassed by better items later on, but hey, Ricky is the best. Don't at me. Moving to how the Rod of Seasons works in terms of gameplay, you get it pretty early, and the first half of the gameplay loop revolves around Link beating a dungeon, accessing a new area of Holodrum and Subrosia, and gaining a new season. First, you only get to turn one area to winter upon standing on these special tree stumps allocated throughout the land, but you slowly get access to all 4 seasons. Of course, each season has their own quirk. Winter freezes up water and creates snow piles that you can walk on. Summer dries up water, allowing access to places you could never access before, and it grows vines that you can slowly climb on. Spring has many flowers bloom, creating shortcuts that you can cut down or use to kind of shoot you in the air. And falls allows you to pick mushrooms that are special only for picking in the fall, as well as leaves that cover the gaps of holes in the ground that you can cross over. A standout segment of the game for me is the Tarm Ruins, the area housing the 6th dungeon. This is after you've obtained all seasons in the game, and it tests you by traversing the ruins, utilizing everyone that you have in the process using the rod. It's a very cool way of slowly building upon the knowledge that you naturally learn throughout the game. Of course, there are plenty of optional places to go, items to collect, and side questing to do. It's a pretty decent sized world, and it doesn't feel too empty of content. A large mechanic focused on these games is Gacha seeds, where you can collect them, plant them in special soil, and eventually grow them into Gacha nuts, gifting many resources like rings. They can even have a heart piece locked behind this. And you know what, Capcom? You ain't slick. You really like gambling with your Gachapon, don't you? Gacha seeds? Really, man? Gambling! Moving on to rings that I just mentioned, it's another core gameplay mechanic, where upon praised by Vasu, the ring shop owner, you can equip various rings for added effects. Many are super niche or inconsequential, but some are straight up useless. They sometimes act as like an achievement, such as slaying 1,000 beasts or giving buffs like damage or defense up. My favorites are turning into other races like Moblins, Octroks, and hell, even Subrosians. The worst part though is that you cannot do anything, you can't even use these items, interact with them when you are those other races. But some of the rings are genuinely pretty cool. If you are a completionist, you have to play and link both games to even get a shot at trying to get every ring, but you can transfer your inventories between the 2 saves, which is pretty cool, so I appreciate that. Lastly, upon beating the game, you can link your save file to the other planned Oracle game. I will save this more relevant time in part 2, where I talk about how the linking of the game works. Stay tuned.
Straight. Stay tuned.
Of course, moving back to the plot, once all essences are obtained, Link pierces the barrier and confronts Onyx, defeating him, as well as his dark dragon form that he summons in battle. Onyx as a villain is honestly nothing special. I mean, hell, Gordon Ramsay would probably call him bloody raw with how undercooked he is. You virtually do not see him from the beginning through the final fight. Of course, I am skipping a big detail. Onyx is truly nothing more than a pawn for the duology's true villainous duo, Twin Rova. Famously from Ocarina of Time, these 2 geriatrics are back, warning Link earlier in the game, only to reveal themselves as using Onyx as well as Age's villain to enact their ceremony to resurrect, well, of course you guessed it, Ganon. If this is the base game, you get a foreboding scene with Twin Rova, but the game ends once you restore peace to Holodrum and save Din. A happy reunion as you would expect, but left at a cliffhanger. Regardless of the first game chosen, Link doesn't get to finish the fight until he links his game with the password given upon completion. Once again, I'll save this for part 2. Moving on to what pros and cons we have, this is a game I've played a lot. It's super basic and fun, with the dungeon spread being pretty solid overall. There isn't necessarily a low point for me, however, the highs aren't insanely high peaks either. I think once the game hits the tail end, the final dungeons are super fun. Dungeon 7 Explorer's Crypt and 8 Sword and Shield Maze are super fun, combining all you've learned and puts it to the final test. They are definitely the standouts for me. And also, shout out to an actual original boss. Link straight up fights a Medusa head in the 8th dungeon, which is a pretty good fight, probably my favorite. It's just a simple fight, providing no puzzle but simple action, as Seasons does tend to brag about with their gameplay style. I do have to say, the Land of Holodrum isn't super exciting if I'm being honest, maybe due in part to needing to have 4 copies of the land with the changing seasons and what have you, but the second, A Land of Subrosia, is very neat. I do like that. It's a cool standout, and they're also just a super cool race that I really like to be Brack. I mean, really, we just had a game where you went underground, explored depth. I was really hoping we get at least some sort of Subrosia reference, but whatever. Subrosians are a cool race with their designs, paired with the different personalities, preferring a less polite, more direct confrontation. Different currency with rock ores, their affinity with hanging out in lava, it's like the bathe in it and whatnot, and just how goofy they end up being. In a classic Zelda fashion, one of the NPCs in Subrosia is obsessed with signs. He tracks how many signs you've destroyed, and his attitude changes the more signs you have actually broken. And he actually does finally snap if you've broken more than 100 signs, pretending to reset your game, followed by giving you a special ring to commemorate the occasion. Of course, the volcanic, more creative approach is definitely proving to be a highlight in the lands underneath. The story is also a rather low point, too. While most Zelda games don't have an extremely gripping narrative, we move on to the counterpart of these games. I feel like the story is non-existent in Seasons, as well as the characters are lackluster, and honestly, there's just not that many standout characters. Barely any returning characters, even Imta, who is shown in both, seems to have a more prominent role in Ages. Din, while design-wise, and shown to have a pretty interesting personality, especially in contrast to the usual heroine of the Zori Zelda, she's cool, she's just not in the game. I wish she had more screen time opposed to the beginning and the end. Same with General Onyx. Very sick design, imposing, but does nothing to show for it. It does kind of blow that Onyx and the flipside villain Varan are just basic pawns for Ganon, but once again, we do see that Varan has so much more going for her in terms of story. Now, I understand that's definitely not the forefront in terms of narrative, what the Zelda team was going for, I'm sure, but once again, with these Zelda games, they really do got a nitpick. Now, a complaint I could see, but I'm going to address, is just people being miffed over a lack of content, or content being held back. That being said, with the whole linking game, and if you don't play both games, you're kind of missing out on some story beats. But honestly, I really do not mind. They each stand alone as a great Zelda game, enhanced by the linking. Plus, I'm sure it would have been too much to pack everything in one cartridge at a time. Other games have done this in the past. I can think of the Golden Sun games doing the same thing, and that was on the Game Boy Advance. But that being said, I really don't have any issue with this. All of this combined, the game length, the dungeons, and pretty much everything is a really perfect length. Any super dreadful parts were said and done with really quickly, and although looking back, I do not have anything that's inherently awful, too. I'd say in terms of lows and peaks, there aren't that many. The game is just a very consistent quality throughout the runtime, and it's not super long, and you can get through it pretty quickly, which is also just a boon. Alright, and then I said this once, so I'll say it again, because I talked about this in Minish Cap. The item switching with only 2 face buttons to use begs the duology to be remastered. I already won't get into this too much since I talked about it a bit, but it's one small thing that hasn't aged well and really could be better on a remaster or remake for better consoles. I want to save a proper overview for both the games, but I still need to conclude this somehow. Seasons, in all honesty, is the lesser of the 2 games, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, there are great aspects of this game, and I just feel like there are other aspects that are underutilized and not used at all. The story is minimal, and a lot of things are reused, making the game just kind of feel not the same, especially comparing to Ages. Now, I do have some gripes, as I already said, but I just don't think this game should be as overlooked as I feel like it is sometimes. I do have a lot of memories with this game, don't get me wrong as well, but I think it does deserve all the praise it should be getting, and it is a great contender and a strong lineup for Zelda games that we already have. These games should not be overlooked. If you haven't played them, please do yourself a favor and play them. As you just stated, it does use assets we've seen before, but does take new spins on things, which should be commended. It adds new items that we see return in later games. It has races that I haven't seen before but are super creative. It establishes characters on the bombastic lineup that Zelda boasts. I like how it takes a character that was already established like Din and turns her into a cool character. I would love to see more from her and the rest of the oracles. The seasons mechanic is a fun, visually nice and easy thing to follow, never having to check what season it is, you just know because of the colors. A twist on the day and night formula too that I haven't seen in other games do, but is a very unique take. just swapping through the seasons instead of just your classic day and night is something that I really like to see, and I would love to see somewhat return in maybe a future Zelda game as well. Other than that, I'm going to cut it here, but I have one more little aspect of story to talk about. In the Maku tree that we talked about earlier, inside sits Furore. She is down the Oracle of Secrets in this game. She sits in both games holding a book of secrets that you can use when linking the games. Upon defeating Onyx and saving Din, we were given a code to link to Labrina, a different land that might need our help. When speaking to characters, you find out that Impa is already headed out to Labrina because messages received of needing help from their oracle, Nehru, the Oracle of Ages. So, I think next time we'll use this code, boot up the game when we start our next one in Oracle of Ages. I hope you stay tuned, subscribe, and wait for this next one when we get to part 2 of this small retrospective. Until then, thank you guys for watching. See you later. Peace.